So the fourth story summary for David is called A Shepherd Protects and a Shepherd Mourns. And it's going to cover from 1 Samuel 26 to 2 Samuel 2. So you want to make sure you go listen or read so that you can get the full story. And this is the true story summary for David in this section. So as King Saul kept pursuing David and his men remained faithful in protecting the nation of Israel. And one time when they were hiding out in the caves, there was an occasion where David could have killed King Saul, but he didn't. He didn't want to put his hand against the anointed of God. And when Saul went out to relieve himself, David snuck out and cut the edge of his coat, and his men tried to persuade him to kill him, but he wouldn't. But when Saul was far enough away, he let Saul know that he had spared his life. And even Saul admitted that David was more righteous than he was. So as David and his men were out and hiding, they actually gained favor with the king of the Philistine nation. King Achish totally trusted David, so much so that he actually gave David the city of Ziklag. And David and his mighty men lived in Ziklag. Well, the kings were gathering in Philistine to go off to war against Israel. And David lined up with his mighty men to go. And King Achish, he didn't care. He trusted David. He didn't know that David was out secretly defeating the enemies of Israel, his own people. And while they were lining up to go, the other kings were like, we know who he is and we know what they claim about him. He cannot go. And so David and his men were sent back to Ziklag. But while they were away, the Amalekite army attacked Ziklag, and it destroyed everything. It took their possessions and their families, all of David's family and his men. And the men were in utter despair. But David rallied his men, and he said, we will go and we will pursue them. And they did, and they pursued until they reached the Amalekite men, and they defeated them. And they were able to bring back every single person unharmed, all of their possessions, and all of the spoils of war. Well, David was so blessed in how God had provided for them with the spoils of war, he decided to give part of that to Judah. And so he sent some of the spoils of war to Judah as a blessing from the Lord. Now, at the same time that David was fighting the Amalekites, the Philistines were fighting the nation of Israel. And it was in this war that King Saul and 3 of his sons were killed, including Jonathan. And when David received word that King Saul and Jonathan had died, he grieved and mourned over them, for he loved King Saul as his king, even unto his death. And this grieved him greatly. Well, when Judah heard this happen, the nation of Judah and Israel decided to make David their king. And so David served as their king. He ended up serving for 7 years and 6 months. But this was not a time of peace. It was a time of war. It was a civil war between the north and the south, between David's people and King Saul's people. And as the war continued, David's strength increased over and over, and Saul's people decreased. His son Ishbosheth was the one who was the king in the land. And one night while he was sleeping, 2 men went in and killed him in his bed. And they were thinking, we're going to go and tell David what we've done because he's going to praise us for what we have done. And when David heard, he was just undone, because he was reminded that he had promised he would protect the family of Jonathan and Saul. And so he had those 2 men killed. He couldn't believe that someone would go and kill a righteous man while he's in his bed sleeping. Well, when all of this was done, David inquired of God, what's my next steps? What am I supposed to do? And God told him he was to go on to Hebron. May God honor the telling of his word. It's so important to be in the word so that we can be with Jesus, so we can be transformed. Shalom, y'all.